So good evening, dear beloved Compassionate Ocean Sangha. It's such a delight to be together with everybody. I think I say almost every evening that each time we come together, it's my favorite moment of the day. I look forward to it so much. Welcome to this evening's Dharma Talk. It's lovely to be together with friends from all over the world, from Australia. First of all, we have our Sanghas from all over Australia. We have friends from the United States who've joined us, although it's very early in the morning for them. We also have our friends from Europe who are with us, and also our dearly beloved friends in Singapore, Malaysia, China, and many other countries in Asia. Thank you so much for joining with us this evening. Why don't we begin as we've begun each other week when we've had a Dharma talk with a few minutes of sitting meditation while our other friends join us. So I'd like to invite you to find yourself in your most comfortable posture, a posture that you feel completely yourself, you feel completely at ease. You have nowhere to go and you have nothing to do. And once you establish a firm foundation with perhaps if you're sitting on a cushion, your two knees in contact with the mat. If you're sitting on a chair, your 2 feet in contact with the floor. Then I invite you to allow your spine to come into alignment, perhaps rocking your body back and forth from side to side, inviting your vertebrae to rest one on top of the other. You might find that you gain a couple of centimeters in height as you do so, just releasing that compression that occurs through the day. And then I often like to roll my shoulders back slightly just to open my heart space. In meditation, like in yoga, we always lead from our heart and not from our head. Placing my hands gently in my lap, I like to close my eyes and just do a gentle body scan to notice how my body's feeling in this moment. If there are sensations of ease and openness, or there's areas of my body that feel tight and constricted, I don't try to change anything, but I simply observe and notice, bringing a gentle kind of attention to what's there. And I take a moment just to invite myself, body and mind, to arrive here, to let go of all the places that I've been today, all of the experiences that I've had, any expectations about what's going to occur that I might be holding. Simply let them all go, and I choose to be here in this moment with my lived experience as it's arising here and now. And very slowly and very gently, I bring my attentiveness, I bring my mindfulness to recognize my breath, the physical sensation of my breath, perhaps at the tip of my nose, that first touch point of air when it enters my body and becomes breath. Or perhaps deeper in the nostrils, or perhaps back in the sinuses, the back of the throat, down my windpipe, or deep in my lungs, or my abdomen rising to complete an in-breath and falling to begin an out-breath. Without changing my breath in any way, and just bringing a gentle and loving attention, the kind of attention that I would bring to a dearly beloved friend that I haven't seen for a long time. As I breathe in, this is my in-breath, just as it is. And as I breathe out, this is my out-breath, just as it is. As I continue to be aware of the physical sensation of my breath, I have nowhere to go, nothing to do. I have arrived fully in this moment. And as I breathe out, I'm at home, body and mind, right here and right now. I have arrived. I'm home. As I breathe in, I bring awareness to the fact that at this moment in time, I'm sitting surrounded by fellow practitioners who are spread all over this world, practicing mindfulness together. And as I breathe out, this is a happy moment. Present moment, happy moment. So dear beloved community, today is the 3rd of May in the year 2020. So congratulations, we've made it to May. This is something to celebrate indeed. And I'm sitting in Australia at the moment in Mountain Spring Monastery, which is in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales, outside of Sydney, in a small town, or just a little bit outside of a small town called Bilpin, which is known for its mountain apples. And I know we're all sitting in various places throughout the world. It's such a delight to be together. This Sangha, the Compassionate Ocean Sangha, began at the beginning of the lockdowns in Australia. And over the past months, we've met every single evening to practice together, to sit, to share, to laugh, to cry, to sing, to drink tea. And it's been such a source of nourishment. It's been a surprise each and every evening. Each evening is so different. And I was very touched just a couple of nights ago in one of our breakout groups. One of our friends shared that she was initially very disappointed that it was quite difficult to practice together with a Sangha or to have retreats and events here in Australia during this time. She felt very disconnected. And she felt that something was lacking because she's gone through a lot of preparation to go to retreats and other activities in our monasteries. And when it was not possible, she felt really down. But somehow she joined this Sangha that's gathering every evening. And she's felt that it's been one of the deepest practice opportunities of her life so far. And she's had an opportunity to go deeply simply because of that regularity and the depths of sharings and experiences that we've had together. So this is something that's wonderful. This is a precious gift of this time, which has been a time that's been strange, and it's been a time of a lot of fear. It's been a time of a lot of profound change and uncertainty within each one of us, and certainly around. For us here in Mountain Spring Monastery, we've just established this monastery, and we're spending time practicing our meditation practice and doing walking meditation on this land. We have waterfalls, we have springs, we have forest, we have bush in the back. So we spend time to walk mindfully and to listen to this land, to listen to the stories it has to tell us, to learn how to take care of this land and to let it take care of us. We realize that in some way the land has a story to tell us, and now we're also part of that story. So we're building that deep relationship together with this environment that we have this opportunity to take care of for these few decades that we will be alive here, and passing it on to future generations. Lately, I've been thinking about story a lot. And I personally really love wisdom stories. I find in my own teaching practice that people tend to remember the stories and the jokes that I tell more than the lists of things. And so often I try to hide a little bit of Dharma in the stories that I tell. There's one story that's been on my heart. It came back to me this afternoon when I was walking around in the wind. There were some very strong winds up here in the mountains yesterday and today. And so this story came again on the wind to me today. And it feels kind of appropriate to tell this evening, just with the topic that we're going to be looking into. It's a continuation this evening of the topic that we've been exploring for the last month, which are the factors of awakening. So it's a story of, it's one of those wisdom stories that's passed along in different traditions, and it's come to me through the Jewish tradition. And it's the story of a poor tailor in Krakow, in Poland, in Eastern Europe. His name was Jakub Nieko, and he had no money to feed his family at all. He was really worried about this. How is he going to feed his children and his partner? And so he was praying for a miracle, just asking for a miracle. How am I going to survive? I don't have anything at all. And that night, after just sending that message out to the universe, he had a vivid dream, a dream that was so real to him that it seemed like he was awake. He dreamt of treasure hidden under a bridge in Prague. And so the next morning he woke up and he just felt like, okay, I have to go to Prague. No matter what, I have to walk and travel all the way and go to Prague, and I'm going to find the treasure and I'll be able to feed my family. So his family thinks he's completely crazy, but he sets out on a journey to Prague. And after a number of months, he arrives in Prague and looks around the city and finally sees the bridge of his dreams. So he goes to the bridge and he begins digging under the bridge. So he's digging away for a while, and then suddenly he hears somebody shout out, "Hey, you, what are you doing?" And he turns around and looks, and there's a policeman, and he gets a little bit afraid. And the policeman comes up to him and says, "What are you doing there? Why are you digging under this bridge?" And Jakob and Yeko says to him, "Well, I had a dream that there would be treasure under this bridge, and I have no money to feed my family. I'm here to dig up the treasure." And the policeman said, "Well, that's a very stupid thing, to travel all the way here from where you came from, far away, to dig up treasure under a bridge that just came to you in a dream. Last night, I had a dream that there would be a man coming and digging under the bridge, and his name would be something like Yeko, Jakob. But, you know, like, how could that be?" And I also, in that dream, I also was told that there's treasure under that man's fireplace, and he should go and look under his fireplace. "By the way, is your name Yeko?" And our friend Jakob and Yeko says, "Yeah, my name is Yeko, my name is Yeko." And the policeman said, "See, even I had that dream. I wouldn't go running after it. I'm sure it's just a load of rubbish." So Jakob and Yeko decides to go back home, and he travels all the way back to Krakow and gets to his home, and he pulls out his fireplace and he begins digging. And the whole family think, well, we thought he was crazy when he left. Now he's even crazier. But they watch him for a while and they think, well, we may as well join in. So they all get together and they start digging. And after a while, I think they must have dug down to about elbow deep. So when they got down to about elbow deep, they found a little bag. And in the bag, there were 6 silver coins. So they pulled out these coins and they were so excited because it was enough to feed the family for quite a number of years. So they thought, this is fantastic. And they put the fireplace back. And for a number of years, they were able to live quite comfortably with those 6 silver coins. Until one day, there was a knock on the door and there was a beggar at the door. And the beggar said, "I have nothing. Would you be able to share something with me?" And Jakob and Yeko decides in that moment to give him the last silver coin. They'd used everything except the last silver coin. So he gives the silver coin to the beggar. And then the beggar says, "Jakob and Yeko, I've got 2 words to say to you." And Jakob and Yeko says, "What are the 2 words?" And the beggar says, "Dig deeper," and then turns away. And so Jakob and Yeko wrestles with this for days. What does he mean by digging deeper? What does he mean by this? What could it mean? And the only thing that came to him was that he should dig deeper under the fireplace. So he pulled out the fireplace again and kept digging and digging and digging. And the family really thought that he lost it at that point. He just kept digging and digging and digging. But the family was also compassionate. So after watching him for a little while, they all joined in. And then at one point, one of the children hits like a wooden box. They find a wooden box very deep in the earth under there, and they dig it up, and it's filled with gold coins and rubies and treasures. So here in this wisdom story that's been passed down through a number of different spiritual traditions and wisdom traditions in the world, we have a beautiful teaching. It's a teaching for each one of us that we can receive on many levels. First, there's often in the spiritual path, this idea that we have to embark on a search, and we do in a lot of ways, this search for meaning, this search for answers, this calling forth, as we've discussed in previous weeks, the calling forth in our lives, the noble messengers that have come to us, whether it's through the form of suffering or pain or death, or even in the case of our friend through a dream, through some kind of call on our heart. And we embark on a search. And if we're lucky enough, that search, whereas initially we think the treasure or what we need to discover is very far away, it will bring us back home. And then in the initial stages, we discover something. And that's already something to celebrate if we discover something. But it's a pity if we stop there. Our challenge is to keep digging deeper, and to keep digging deeper, not outside of ourselves, not under our fireplaces, but deep in our heart, to dig deeper into ourselves. That in a lot of ways, our journey of discovery is never completed. There's always something more to uncover, always something more. And the real treasure is within us. It's been there all along. And this is really the heart of the Buddha's teaching, that we don't need any other thing. We are already what we want to become. And our practice is a practice of uncovering what has been within us all along. That seed of goodness, that seed of awakening, that seed of loving kindness, that place of clarity that's been there from the very beginning. In 1998, I remember hearing a teaching from Thay, and he was sharing with us that in our spiritual practice, we need to stop running around like an orphan and come back home and realize what we have been all along. Come back home and claim our inheritance. And in our spiritual lineage, one of the great teachers of our lineage, Master Lin Chi, Master Rinzai, he says something really powerful. He says, followers of the way, the Buddha Dharma doesn't need any skilled application. Just be your ordinary selves with nothing further to seek, going to the bathroom, putting on your clothes and eating. If you master the situation that you're in, wherever you stand, everything becomes the truth. You're no longer a victim of your circumstances. So what are you feverishly running after? Putting a head on top of your own head. Your head is right where it should be. The trouble lies in your not believing in yourselves enough. Because you don't believe in yourselves, you're knocked here and there by all the situations in which you find yourselves. I remember a few weeks ago that I shared that perhaps one of the most difficult things for us as a practitioner is to believe and have confidence in our own innate goodness, to develop the capacity to believe in our own ability to wake up, to have confidence that we too can wake up to our own situation. We can transform our suffering. This is what the Buddha said. And yet it's really challenging for us to be able to direct our attention away from all the things we need to fix, all of the challenges that we have, all of the suffering we have, to recognize what's been there all along, that treasure that's been there all along. Our practice, as Thay often teaches us, is not a practice of hard labor, working hard for 20, 30, 40 years, but it's a practice in which the fruits are immediate. We practice in such a way that we already experience that which we're looking for, that which we think we need to travel to Prague to find. We experience it right with this in-breath and out-breath. The Dharma is described as being immediately useful and effective, not something that will be useful and effective in 20 or 30 years' time, but that we should be able to touch right here and right now, right in the heart of the absolutely ordinary moments of our lives. As I shared during the past few weeks, we've been exploring the 7 factors of awakening, these qualities that the Buddha used to describe awakening, both as an every moment path and a fruition. So it's both the experience of that great awakening, and it is the manifestation of awakening in each and every moment. And one of the reasons I chose the 7 factors of awakening as this series is that in the Compassionate Ocean Sangha, we're focusing on 3 main meditation practices. We're focusing on loving kindness, which helps. One of the qualities of loving kindness is that it helps us to enter concentration quite easily. And then we're focusing on the Satipatthana, the 4 establishments of mindfulness, and we're focusing on mindfulness of breathing, the Anapanasati. And in the Anapanasati and in the 4 establishments of mindfulness, in both of those texts, we hear about the 7 factors of awakening, that those practices also give rise to the 7 factors of awakening. So it seemed to me important to offer this series of teachings as we explore those meditative practices together. These energies so far that we've discussed of mindfulness, of investigation or curiosity into things, of energy and effort and joy and ease, that beautiful experience of passaddhi, this experience of on every level that we explored together last week. And I also shared a couple of weeks ago about my own insight gatha when I received the lamp in 2003, and my realization that a lot of the imagery in my insight gatha came from the Lotus Sutra. So as I was contemplating the 7 factors of awakening, a number of series of 7s came to me to share this evening. And the first of the 7s is, of course, the 7 factors of awakening, which we're exploring together. But then also in the Lotus Sutra, there are 7 stories, 7 powerful stories in the Lotus Sutra. And one of them seems quite similar to me to the wisdom story that we explored together in the beginning, the story of our friend Jakob. And it's the story of a poor man who goes to visit a rich friend. And they have a nice evening together. They have a beautiful meal together. And then the poor friend, at the end of the meal, he's so full that he falls asleep. And suddenly, while the poor friend is asleep, the rich friend is called away. The rich friend is called away on business and has to leave very suddenly. But he sees the condition of the poor friend and decides to put a jewel, a priceless jewel, in the cloak of the poor friend. So he does that, and then he goes off. The poor friend wakes up and sees that the rich friend is gone and leaves the house and then goes on with his life for a few years, and he has a lot of very difficult experiences. A lot of poverty, not having anything to eat, becoming sick, and so on, just wandering and wandering, until finally, after a number of years, he meets again the rich friend by chance. And the rich friend is kind of surprised to see the poor friend in such a destitute condition, and says to the poor friend, "Why are you in this situation?" And the poor friend said, "Well, I have nothing. I've got nothing at all. The only thing I have is the coat on my back. Really, I've been through such a difficult situation since you left." And the rich friend says, "I don't understand why. Because when I left, I put a priceless jewel in your cloak." And the poor friend says, "What are you talking about?" And then the rich man points out, and the poor friend opens the seam of the cloak and discovers that there's a priceless jewel there all along. The rich friend here is the Buddha, of course. And then the poor friend is us. And then the jewel here is this unobstructed mind, this innate goodness that we call Buddha nature, that we've been speaking about over the last few weeks. This seed of goodness, this capacity that we all have to wake up and to transform our situation. in a lot of ways, we've been running all of our lives searching for something that we had all along. And it's our true inheritance. It's the true treasure that we have. And that is that we all have the capacity to wake up. We all have the capacity to transform our suffering. The Buddha said that each one of us has the capacity to become a Buddha. And the real question is, when are we going to actually admit to ourselves, to acknowledge to ourselves this capacity, and to begin to operate from that foundation rather than from a foundation of brokenness, to operate from that foundation of innate goodness, of uncovering what's been there all along. Why don't we enjoy the sound of the bell? So speaking of treasures, and it seems that we're speaking a lot about treasures and jewels this evening. There are 7 treasures of the heart that are described in the texts that seem to me to be really important to share. The first treasure of the 7 treasures is the treasure of confidence, saddha, in the Pali language. This is confidence in our own capacity to wake up, and confidence in our path. We've recognized some transformation in our life. We see that we're just a little bit, maybe 10% happier. We're a little bit more at ease. We're a little less angry. And if we don't recognize that ourselves, because some of us can be quite hard on ourselves, it might be that our partner has shared that with us. They just say, you know what, you're reacting a little bit less strongly than before, or you're a little bit happier. I see you smiling more. Sometimes we need others to be our mirrors. So the treasure of confidence, born of recognizing our own transformation. As Tay shared with us, happiness is knowing that we're on the right path. And we know we're on the right path if we see elements of transformation in our own lives and in the lives of others. You know, in the texts, in the commentaries, it's said that to have met these teachings that have the opportunity to unlock, to awaken this capacity that we have within us is rare. It's described as being as rare as if there's a blind turtle swimming around under an ocean about the size of the Pacific Ocean. And I can tell you from experience, the Pacific Ocean is a big ocean. When you fly from the west coast of the United States to Australia, it's about at least 14 and a half, 15 hours to cross in one nonstop flight. It's a vast ocean. So we imagine a blind turtle swimming around in this vast ocean that surfaces once every 100 years. Now, on the top of the ocean is a plank of wood that floats around with the currents. And it has a little hole in the plank of wood. So it's said that it's as rare for us to have these good conditions to meet these teachings, or to meet such a wonderful community of practice as our Plum Village Sangha and our Compassionate Ocean Sangha, as it would be for that blind turtle that surfaces every 100 years, to surface in such a way that they put their head right through the hole in the wood at that time. And I think it's not only so rare to be able to come into contact with these teachings, but it's even rarer to be able to respond to them in some way. When we think about it, so many people have heard teachings or spiritual teachings, whether they're from the Buddhist tradition or other traditions, but it just doesn't land. It doesn't touch them at all. So not only have they just heard them and they've had that rare experience of receiving teachings that transform, but they haven't like being able to have that penetrate in any way into their consciousness. But even if it penetrates at some level, there's another level of rarity, and that is to have the capacity to apply these teachings, even in some small way. Maybe it's as simple as the only thing we do in our spiritual practice is stopping and listening to the bell and breathing in and out 3 times. Maybe that's all some of us have the capacity to do. But when you consider all of the conditions of your own life, all the causes and conditions, the situations that you've gone through, first of all, you've had an opportunity to meet a great teacher in our teacher Thay, or in the Plum Village community, or in your local Sangha, or in the Compassionate Ocean Sangha. That is already rare. It's so precious. It's a precious jewel. And then you've been able to hear teachings and they've penetrated in some way. And then each of us on this Zoom today is practicing the practice. And I'm sure most of us on the call are not just practicing stopping, although that's already a profound practice in and of itself, but we're also practicing many other things, such as mindful eating and walking and listening to Dharma talks and so on. What a thing to celebrate. What a thing to have confidence in. And for me, when I consider these aspects in my own life, it awakens a sense of confidence in my own path and also in my own capacity to wake up. Because even to a small degree, a very limited degree, these factors of coming into contact with teachings, of having them penetrate even in a small way to my own limited capacity, and then having a chance to put something into practice, that's precious. So if we see those 3 conditions in our life, if you see them in your life, then you can have confidence. You can have a deep sense of confidence in your capacity to wake up and in your path. This is something to celebrate. The second treasure is the treasure of the mindfulness trainings. And we've gone into depth about the practice of the mindfulness trainings over the course of the last couple of months. Our teacher Thay shares that mindfulness can be replaced with the word love. Because when you are fully present for yourself and for others, it becomes natural to want to take care of yourself and for others. And the mindfulness trainings have as one of their aims, the aim to transform the root of ill will, to generate love. That the essence of the practice of the mindfulness trainings is the practice of love. Love for oneself, wanting to take deep care of ourselves and wanting to take care of those around, not wanting to harm others. And so this treasure, the treasure of mindfulness trainings, is something very precious, this treasure of the heart. The third treasure is the treasure of conscience. In the Pali language, it's hiri, H-I-R-I, hiri. It means this sense of self-care, this sense of knowing what is actually some action that's in line with our deepest aspiration. We sense it within ourselves. And I like to look at it as also as an element of self-care. Being able to look within ourselves and reflect on how different actions kind of sit with us. And was this an action of care for ourselves? How does that sit? And to not have an inner conflict about things. That's considered to be a treasure of the heart, to have that capacity of self-reflection and self-care in Buddhism. The fourth treasure is the treasure of concern. In Pali language, it's ottappa. And here it means concern for others, or concern about the way in which our behavior impacts others, and also concern for their welfare. It's considered to be a real treasure to understand the way that each of our actions affects the lives of others. And so that treasure of concern is a way, I guess we could say in our modern psychological language, it's this sense of empathy, of understanding that our actions deeply impact the lives of others, and acting out of concern. The fifth treasure is the treasure of listening. And of course, this is the practice of listening deeply to what's taking place within ourselves and with others, to not react. But I also take the practice of listening a little bit deeper than just listening with our ears. I see the practice of listening as a practice of opening a space of availability. When you listen, you're not changing the situation in any way. If you're listening, your mouth is usually closed. You're not doing anything else, but you're fully present to open the space of availability for what's there. It's said that a wise person hears one word with their ears, but two words with the heart. So this treasure of listening, I see, is opening the space of availability, offering a presence for ourselves and for each other. I see it in this sense, in the form of a practice, as not having a dual agenda, of not trying necessarily all the time to change or to fix the situation immediately, but to really hear what's being said and what's not being said. And then rather than just reacting, to choose how to respond. And that's definitely an art. That's a lifetime's work right there, whether it's learning how to respond to our own internal formations and emotions and feelings, to take good care of those energies that are arising, rather than to push them away or pull them towards. And the same way, it's a real art to learn how to respond to outward situations. The sixth treasure is the treasure of generosity. And we've had a whole Dharma talk in the Compassionate Ocean Sangha on the three kinds of generosity. The Buddha often began his teachings with this teaching of reaching out and connecting with community, the practice of generosity as healing our isolation, this practice of wanting to share all the good conditions that we have with others, whether they're of the three traditional types of generosity, which are physical, tangible gifts, the gift of emotional support, or the gift of the Dharma. Those three traditional kinds of gifts: material gifts, immaterial gifts, and the gift of the Dharma. And to that, I add a fourth one, which is not listed in the traditional texts. I add a fourth kind of generosity, and that's the willingness to receive. And I really believe, and I observe in my own life and in the lives of others, that it's actually more challenging sometimes to receive something than it is to give. Might be interesting to reflect on why that is. I think it's because when we receive, we're not necessarily in control, in the usual sense of the situation. If you're a giver, and it's quite a different position in terms of power dynamics than receiving. But receiving something is a deep act of generosity, whether you receive another person's presence, or you receive a physical gift from that person, or sometimes maybe even to receive their pain. That's a deep act of generosity. So for many of us, especially in the Buddhist community, I see that we're quite good at giving in the usual sense, the three traditional kinds of giving. We've developed those capacities really highly. And that's something to celebrate. It's something we should cultivate. But at the same time, I'd like to invite us to consider how we practice receiving. This is a powerful practice, a healing practice. The seventh treasure of the heart that's listed in the text is the treasure of discernment. And this, I see, goes along with the quality of curiosity or investigation, which is one of the factors of awakening. It's seeing things as they are. seeing things as they are and not seeing our idea of things, but being able to penetrate to the heart of a matter. Why don't we enjoy sound of the bell? When we consider mindfulness as love, as this space of open-heartedness and availability and presence for what is, it's interesting to consider that old joke. You know, I love everybody except that person over there. Some of us can be in that situation of loving everyone except that person. We've been in the Compassionate Ocean Sangha, every Tuesday night, we've been having a class for the last few weeks on the discourse on love, on the practice of metta. And we've been focusing quite a lot on the discourse on love itself, but there's another discourse that goes along with the discourse on love. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya, and it's the simile of the soul. It's a beautiful discourse. I recommend you look it up. It's the 21st sutra in the middle length sayings. It's quite a long sutra, so we won't read the whole thing tonight. There's just one aspect I'd like to share about. And that is that in that text, we read that even if a person behaves in a terrible way, a way that we find abhorrent, we find completely shocking, or it's really harmful in some way, we will live pervading them with an awareness that is filled with goodwill. And beginning with that person, we will keep pervading the all-encompassing world with an awareness imbued with loving kindness, abundant, expansive, and free. And we're invited to train ourselves in that way. So I find this to be very powerful. It's quite different from our usual way of developing loving kindness. Usually, we're trained to develop loving kindness in the initial stages towards ourselves, towards those that are dear to us, towards a neutral person, towards somebody who maybe we have difficulty with as kind of the last stage. But here, once we've established a practice of loving kindness, we're actually invited to choose that person, if there's a person or maybe a situation that has really behaved in a difficult way or we find incredibly difficult. That person or that situation is the lens through which we radiate loving kindness to the whole world. It's not a matter of, I love everybody, I'll generate loving kindness to everyone, and then I'll include you in it at some point, kind of energy. But rather, in this text, we have this somewhat sea change of attitude, of turning, and from that base of our firm foundation of confidence in our path, confidence in the capacity of our heart, that person that we find difficult, or that situation, which might even be the situation of the lockdown that many of us are experiencing as quite difficult, is the lens through which we generate loving kindness for the whole world. I find that to be a powerful practice. In the commentaries, we hear the story of two people. There was a woman who, she was a rather rich woman, and she had a servant girl who was helping her quite a bit. And the rich woman was a practitioner of loving kindness. She used to spend a lot of time with the Buddha and other senior practitioners, and was quite adept in the practice of loving kindness meditation. The servant girl had come from a very difficult background. I consider her, when I read her story, I consider that she probably had a lot of trauma. She came from a lot of difficulty. And over time, even though she had a lot of good conditions, she had a lot of resentment build up towards the mistress of the house, who was the practitioner of loving kindness. She felt really jealous. And it got to the point where she thought, I want to kill this woman, and then I'll take over as the mistress of the house. Her delusion had gotten so strong that it got to that point. And so one day she was heating up a pot of oil on the stove, probably to fry something. The commentary doesn't say, but obviously to fry something. And then the mistress of the house came in, and then the servant girl thought, fine, this is my opportunity. I'm going to pick up the pot of oil and I'll pour it all over the mistress of the house. And then she'll be gone, and I'll be able to take over. So she picked up the pot and she turned towards the mistress of the house. And the mistress of the house saw her. And when she saw her, immediately this thought came to her mind: this poor woman who's obviously suffering deeply has helped me so much. She's done so much for me that I could not have all of these conditions to practice if she had not been helping me cook and clean and wash the clothes and things. I'm so grateful to her. If I have a seed of anger in my heart, let the oil burn me. If I only have loving kindness in my heart, let it flow off me. And so the servant girl poured the oil on the woman, this boiling oil. And then it simply rolled, the commentary says, simply rolled off, because she was an adept at the practice of loving kindness. Now we can take this story as a real story if we wish, or we can look at it a little bit more deeply and consider it as a teaching story, as a metaphorical story. For some of us, we've had experiences where somebody might metaphorically be pouring a pot of oil on us. And if we're not careful, it can burn us, whether it's through words, or whether it's through perhaps a physical altercation, or whether it's a situation. In that moment, there's the possibility, rather than it burning us, to be able to open up and receive that energy, that generosity of presence that we spoke about earlier. And to be able to receive it in a way that it doesn't just roll off into nowhere, but there's this teaching of oil being like a blessing. To be able to receive that and to be able to allow it to be a blessing, because in a way, we have an insight into that person's heart. We have an insight into where they are. And we have an opportunity to be able to take care, to be able to show our love towards that person or that situation, especially that person who may never have had the experience of somebody receiving them, of really seeing them, of really hearing them. In one beautiful text, since some of us over the past week have been sharing about the anger that's been arising in us, the frustration that's been arising in us as we continue over this long period of lockdown, these texts, these teachings are very present for me. There's a beautiful text. It's called Inscriptions. It's the Lekha Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, number 3. And the Buddha says that there are 3 kinds of individuals when we're looking at our response to situations. There are 3 kinds of individuals in the world. There's an individual who's like an inscription on rock. There's an individual who's like an inscription on soil. And there's an individual who's like an inscription on water. And the Buddha goes on to describe that the people who are like inscriptions in rock are the kind of people that if something happens, then it can never be wiped away. It just stays there forever, for eons and kalpas. That the image is it would not wear away quicker than somebody who comes every 1,000 years and just wipes the top of that rock with a silk cloth. The inscription would wear away quicker like that than it would for the anger to dissipate. The second kind of person is a person that when something happens, it remains there for a while, but then it kind of blows away as if it's in the soil. And if you write some words in the soil and you watch, after a day or two, it's gone. And many of us find ourselves in that situation. And then there's the kind of person that when something happens, it's like it's written in water. You write a sentence on the water, it disappears almost immediately. There might be a few ripples, but the water will become still again quite quickly. I would say, rather than each of us being one of the three, I would say that at most of the time, each of us is all three at once. There are some situations in which if it happens, it's so easy for it to disappear. It's like an inscription on water. There's some other things that they disappear, but it might take a few days, and it's an inscription on soil. And then there are some things that if it happens, it takes a long time to disappear, like an inscription on rock. So we're all three at once. And it can be helpful for us to recognize the situations that occur in our life where there's an irritation, and then it's like water, and those that are like soil, and those that are like rock, and start to understand the patterns of our reactivity, to understand what's the commonality for those things that I feel like water that just disappear, or those things that I feel like soil, or those things that I feel like rock. And this is part of the practice of looking deeply, of beginning to understand the patterns of our suffering as we understand the patterns of our happiness. Well, I was supposed to be talking about concentration this evening, Samadhi, which is the next factor of awakening. So I think we're edging ever closer. The factors of awakening are innate qualities of mind. These beautiful qualities that are already there, that we cultivate as practices and fruits of the path. And as I shared last week, one of the reasons I'm always so enthusiastic and so excited about the Buddha's teaching is that the Buddha helps us to cultivate qualities that we all have, not qualities that fall from the sky somewhere, but innate qualities of our human condition, making the ordinary into the extraordinary. So in Buddhism, this quality of concentration, samadhi, is not a mental concentration as a path factor, as a factor of waking up. It's not a mental concentration. In fact, the word concentration in English is a misleading, has a misleading sense, because when we hear that word in English, it equates to that mental energy. Whereas samadhi actually means becoming one. It has many meanings, but it means becoming one with the object of our attention. This mental concentration that we normally think of will just leave us tired and exhausted at the end. But samadhi is deeply restful and satisfying. It's this deepening of mindfulness. Mindfulness, the capacity to stay with, to not float away, naturally deepens into samadhi, into this sense of being able to dwell with something, whether that's our meditation object, to not be running away anymore, to just be resting our attention with our meditation object, or whether it's an awareness of our feelings or any other experiences. It's a dwelling with something, this deeply restful and satisfying feeling. When you dwell with someone, let's say you're in a partnership, when you dwell with someone, you have a completely different insight about their nature than if you just pop in now and then. Through the very act of dwelling with something, whether it's another person or with our breath or with the sensations in our body or with our step, we enter into a deep relationship. We begin to understand so many aspects of our breath, of our step, of the other person, of our happiness, of our anger. And this insight doesn't come from mental energy, but it comes from dwelling with someone or something. So there are many interpretations of the root of the word of samadhi, but basically it means either coming together, a oneness, a non-separation between ourselves and the other, or it can mean to have integration or wholeness. It can also mean uniformly or to get established, to be fully established. Lately, I'm seeing some translators translate samadhi as immersion, and that's not a bad translation, that sense of becoming one with. It's a nice way to look at it. So it's this natural deepening of the energy of mindfulness. It's important to mention that not all concentration is right concentration. In fact, not all samadhi is right samadhi. As a path factor, as a part of the Noble Eightfold Path, not all concentration is right concentration. I know people who've been dwelling in their anger or dwelling with their anger for 20 years. And there's a beautiful story about this tendency of focusing on the wrong things. There was a border guard in Europe, on the Swiss border, who one day a man came up to the border and he had a wheelbarrow and it was filled with sand. And the border guard was pretty suspicious. So he came out and he looked through the sand and went through the sand and he couldn't find anything. And so he had to let him go through. So the man went through, and then a few days later, he was back again with the wheelbarrow, again, full of sand. And the border guard was going through the sand, and trying to find something, sure that he was smuggling something. He went through the sand with a fine-tooth comb, but couldn't find anything at all. And then this kept going on for years, and never, ever could the border guard find anything in the sand, but he just knew that this man must be smuggling something. Why on earth would he be bringing wheelbarrows of sand through the border every few days? So finally, after many decades, it came to the last day of work for the border guard. Luckily enough, the man came through. And so the border guard came out and he said to the man, look, you've been coming through the border like every few days, all of these decades. Be straight with me. You're smuggling something, aren't you? And the man says, what do you mean? Why do you think I'm smuggling something? And the border guard said, well, you come through here with a wheelbarrow full of sand, like every few days. Like, why would you be bringing sand through here? Like, don't tell me you're smuggling sand. Just tell me what you're smuggling. I can't find anything in the sand. It's got to be somewhere. What is it? And then the man said, well, it's your last day, right? And the border guard said, yes, it's my last day. Am I going to get in trouble if I tell you what I'm smuggling? And the border guard said, no, you won't get in any trouble. Like, I'll let you go. Just, we've been doing this for years. Just tell me for my own sanity. And so the man said, well, you're right. I have been smuggling something all these years. I'm really proud of the fact that every few days I've managed to smuggle something through. I've been smuggling wheelbarrows all of this time. You've been looking at the sand, but I've been smuggling wheelbarrows. So this is our situation. We focus on the sand often rather than the wheelbarrows. And in the practice of meditation, in the practice of samadhi, it's important to remember that not all concentration, not all samadhis are necessarily the right samadhis in terms of a path factor, in terms of this energy of waking up. In fact, the Buddha defined in a conversation to Visakha, he defined concentration as a singleness of mind. And he described noble right concentration or right samadhi as this development of mindfulness that leads into a dwelling with. As samadhi, when it comes together with the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. That samadhi, in order to be classed as right samadhi, that it should come together with all the 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, the other 7, such as right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and right mindfulness. That when we have this meditative development, this deep samadhi through our day, that it affects all the different aspects of our life, that it affects the way that we speak, it affects the way we act, it affects our kind of livelihood, that it impacts all areas of our life. And all areas of our life are unified and moving in the same direction, and the direction of our deepest aspiration. And that then it's called right concentration. And Buddhism, as we've shared before, friends, is not a series of techniques where you press a button and you get something. This idea of getting something is such a consumeristic kind of idea. But it's a path. It's a process of discovery. These factors of awakening are manifesting in each and every moment. They're not concepts to wrestle with, but they're concrete tools for us to apply in each and every moment. For example, in mindfulness of breathing, let's use just a couple of examples of the 7 factors of awakening. In the beginning, the first factor of awakening is mindfulness. So this fact of recognizing an in-breath and an out-breath is already mindfulness. It's mindfulness of the in-breath and out-breath. And then very naturally, after some time, you become curious and you begin to notice that each in-breath and out-breath is slightly different. That's already the factor of investigation right there. And then it leads on into the other factors, one by one. So it might be helpful as you're going through your day to start to identify these factors of awakening: mindfulness, investigation, effort, energy, joy, ease, this sense of samadhi, this sense of concentration or oneness or immersion, and see that they are, if our mind is well directed, that they're a process that can be developed and is developed each and every moment. In that way, they're concrete tools and not just things to think about. With samadhi, this factor that we're speaking about and exploring this week, the Buddha shared, finally, he shared that there are 4 fruits of developing this capacity of samadhi. He said the first is a pleasant abiding in the here and now. Now, if you've been to Plum Village or you've heard any teachings of our teacher, he often shares dwelling happily in the present moment is the fruit of the practice. And this is exactly one of the fruits of right concentration, Drishta Dhamma Sukha Vihari, pleasant abiding in the here and now. The second fruit is having the capacity to know and to see, to fully see something for what it is, to penetrate a little bit below the surface appearances of something. The third is samadhi co-arises with mindfulness and alertness. And we've shared before that mindfulness by its nature is an active energy. It's not a passive energy, but it actually generates a sense of alertness and engagement and brings us to life. So here we see that, this co-arising of alertness and mindfulness and engagement. And then the fourth fruit, the final fruit, is the capacity to transform our suffering. So that's the fourth fruit of developing this capacity of samadhi. So dear family, this week, I invite you to contemplate through the week the arising of these factors of awakening. See if you can, without making it into an intellectual exercise, just as an exercise of curiosity, see if you can see how these energies that we've been exploring, these factors of awakening, arise with different wholesome activities such as sitting meditation or walking meditation, or even mindful eating, recognizing and then recognizing the food you're putting in your mouth, and then becoming curious about its origins or its taste and textures and so on. See if you can see how that functions even on a basic level in your daily life. Good luck. We'll enjoy a sound of the bell to bring this talk to a close.